Hello and welcome to the Catholic Mama podcast. I'm your host, Christine Flynn. Thanks for joining me on this episode, the solo episode. I got a question in on my website after my interview for the Journey Home show on EWTN went live. If you watched it, thank you very much for your support and just giving them views, and then also for all the notes and emails and messages that I got. I really appreciate those. There were some really interesting follow-up questions that I received, and I was going to discuss one of them here today. I'm pretty sure that I have talked about this before with Pat, but I can't find the podcast episode. So I figured I'll just come on and talk about this. But first, if you didn't watch the episode of my interview for the Journey Home show on EWTN, you can just go to the Coming Home Network's website, or you can just search for Journey Home, Christine Flynn, spiritual but not religious, or something like that, and you'll be able to find it, or go to the EWTN channel on YouTube. Lots of places to find it. I will try to remember to add the link to the show notes as well. They did a condensed version, so the whole interview is about an hour long, but they did some condensed videos. We recorded some short videos as well when I was in the studio that day. And those are also up on YouTube, and it's like an 8-minute conversion story. So if you can't get through the whole hour, then there's like 8-minute ones, much shorter, and especially a lot shorter than the very long conversion story that I wrote for them that was published in April of 2020. But today I want to talk about a follow-up question that somebody had sent in after watching the recording. And they had asked, you kept saying how much your life had changed after converting. Did your husband, and you mentioned that your husband was better, but what do you mean by that? And I know Pat and I have talked about our marriage on several occasions on the podcast, but I figured I would just do a podcast today and discuss how our marriage changed upon conversion. Now, if you know our conversion story, Pat was an atheist for most of his life and converted to Catholicism before I was even considering or would even consider Christianity. He didn't fully start going, in communion with the church until he was until around the time that I was baptized. But he was going to mass, and he had a conversion of heart, and wound up eventually going through the RCIA process, at least partway. He had done so much of his own independent study that the religious sister in charge of the RCIA faith formation program and the priests at our parish were comfortable that Pat didn't have to go to every one of the weekly sessions, but that I needed to go, which is fair enough. I did need to go. And then he wound up getting confirmed at Pentecost that year, and confessions and getting the Eucharist again and all of that. So Pat had converted before I did. Another question I often get is what would have happened if I never had converted. People are always wondering if they have a husband who is not in the faith, but they are. What would our lives have looked like? I don't know. God decided to help both of us in this way, and we responded to his call in this way. So it's hard to speculate on those kind of hypotheticals. But Pat did convert first, and he did improve. And at the time, I was really angry about that. If you listen to Pat and I were laughing, we watched some of the parts of the interview on EWTN. I was angry at Pat a lot. I kept talking about how angry I was at him, and which is true. I was angry all the time. That was my default reaction to pretty much everything, was just being a no person, being angry, really a wet blanket in a lot of ways. So Pat, really, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Pat was annoying to me, and I was angry at him a lot when he was an atheist, because he didn't really think much about anybody but himself in most cases, or if he did, it was obvious that we were a burden to him. And then he converted and became a better husband and father, and I was angry at him for that too, because how dare he do that and why did it have to be Christianity that made him become a better husband and father? Couldn't have been anything else. Why Christianity? Why did it have to be that? Anything but that. But what I mean about him improving, I don't think that we are unique in any way in respect to how narcissistic we were prior to conversion. I think it's very common in our day and age, in our postmodern, post-Christian culture. We have all kind of, whether explicitly or implicitly, taken on these lessons or these values of narcissism. All right, you do you, you do what's the best for you, you just live your best life. That's your truth. Now, that's a lot of relativism there, and maybe people listening were never relativists, so you don't have to worry about this. But even still, it's always pushing, like, we got to figure out what's best for you, you, right? We always say that the baby boomers were the me generation, but subsequent generations weren't really any better, and aren't any very much better. Even in our moments of trying to band together under social justice endeavors, we still, it still comes down to very much to us, and how we feel, and doing what we want. So I think that in general, I think we are a very narcissistic culture. And so Pat and I being narcissistic, I don't think is unique. I think that many people feel like the way we did. And I don't know if we were like pathologically narcissistic. I don't know if we sat down at a psychologist's office, if they would have told us that. I don't know. But Pat and I did have a lot of problems, and it clearly wasn't getting any better without our conversion to Christianity. I would try all the time, especially when it came to patience. My impatience is really rooted in this idea that me, I know what's best. I should get my way. And then if somebody slows me down or wants to do something else, I would lose my patience entirely, because it was an affront to me. Right? Me. Sorry, I'm moving my hands. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm shaking the camera a little bit. I'm sorry. I like to talk with my hands. So I don't know if that was pathologically narcissistic. I don't know, as far as the textbook definition goes, if that counts as that. But Pat and I are both very narcissistic. His was in a way that was more overt, and mine was in a way that was more internal and harmful in my own thoughts. And well, Pat's an extrovert and I'm an introvert. So I think it makes sense that our narcissistic tendencies exhibited themselves or manifested themselves in a way that jived with our own personalities. So Pat's narcissism, very much business oriented, very much concerned about how much money was in the bank accounts. How did he look to others, buying expensive sports cars, trying to, I'll just let me make this amount of money this month and I will be happy. Don't get in my way when it comes to business. I need to focus. Nobody, the kids would ask him a question, he would totally tune them out. I would try to get him to do something other than making money, and it would be met with frustration that I was even bothering him. Now, this wasn't all the time, right? We weren't living in this like loveless marriage, and the kids weren't being emotionally neglected by their father, but it was evident. It was evident that this was a problem, and I could put my finger on what I didn't like about Pat's personality in those respects. But I don't know if I wouldn't have been able to say, oh, if only he was Christian or whatever. But man, I wish he was a better husband and father. He really thought about himself most of the time. And he worked at home. As an extrovert working alone at home is tough. I was an introvert working in an office all day. I would come home and he would want to get away from the kids. And I could tell that he wanted to get out of the house. But it wasn't just to get out to enjoy life and be an extrovert. It was I felt like he was trying to escape from the ties of family, and so that he could focus on himself, enjoy himself. There was a lot of himself. And his personality was just, again, he's an extrovert. So any of his narcissistic tendencies tended to how others were perceiving him, and how his bank account looked, his follower numbers on social media and all this stuff. His idea of who he was tied directly to numbers that others could see, or manifestations of those numbers, like a Porsche, a bright yellow Porsche, clearly meant that he was successful in business. A certain number of followers would show that. And I would even see it. He's always been a phenomenal teacher. But even in the tone that he would take with customers or clients, or in classes that he would teach, has changed dramatically since converting. For me, my narcissism was more internal. It focused a lot on my impatience with people, that they wouldn't just do what I wanted. I know what's best. My personality type is one of an engineering type mindset, fitting the puzzle pieces together, being as efficient and effective as possible, just getting stuff done. Why can't you just do what I am telling you to do right now? Because it is the best way to get from A to B. And so if somebody would not go along with my A to B plan, I would just get so frustrated and angry. And even in this pivotal moment of Pat's conversion was Christmas Eve. And the weeks leading up to Christmas Eve, have you ever read the children's book, Mistletoe? You'll know Mistletoe is like just frantic. He's mixing and baking and making and wrapping and decorating and all this stuff. Go, 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 go. And doesn't really leave time for, the most important part of Christmas in the book was a Christmas tree. But to me, the most important part about Christmas was Christ and family. And I was not leaving any time or energy for those. And I was making this big Christmas Eve dinner. It was sleeting out. Pat has really bad eyesight and hates driving at night. And it was dark and it was bad inclement weather. And I'm slaving away in the kitchen. And Pat says, I got to go to Christmas Eve mass. And I was so furious at him. Here was somebody who was going to not do my plan, my plan, my. And so he left to go to mass, and I was really angry at him for that. I was also seeing that, I have these barriers against Christianity, for many years, and to see Pat finally turn and start to, if one of our kids came up to him while he was typing away furiously on the computer, he would put the computer aside and turn and look at our child and look him in the eyes as he was talking to him. Or he would, without me asking, actually do a chore. He was raised in a house where he didn't have to do chores. And his parents will often say, "Oh, I bet you hate us for that." I'm like, "Oh yeah, great. Thank you." So to see him actually go and take out the trash without me asking, or putting a dish away in the dishwasher, okay, great. But you're doing it because of Christianity, of all things, that? And I was so angry at him for that. Now, when I began to convert, and over the years of converting, things have changed. Things have changed considerably. It's especially apparent. I was very concerned. I was very concerned when I realized what sort of husband and father Pat was before becoming a Christian. I didn't know these things, right? We met and had a lot of fun, a lot of alcohol, a lot of late nights out, a lot of fun, a lot of worldly fun that we had. And then I got pregnant, and it didn't leave a lot of time to realize that whether or not this person was a person who was going to help me create a wolf-proof home, to create a domestic church, which I wouldn't even have known that phrase back then. But I was realizing that Pat at the time was not entirely that person. And I was very concerned about what the future was going to hold for us. And many times I thought about leaving him. A divorce was on the table for both of us often. And it was increasingly so as we hurtled far, closer to Christianity, but also farther away from it in a sense, or from good values and morals. So then suddenly, and it seems sudden, and it definitely coincided with him going to Catholic mass and trying to have a conversion of heart as well as mind, that he was suddenly looking up from his computer, not just staring at his phone, scrolling through Facebook or Instagram when somebody was talking to him, to look our children in the eye when they spoke to him, to take them out on adventures with him, to lunch, because usually he just didn't want to deal with any of the caretaking stuff. Oh God, no diapers. No, not me. That's not for me. So he wouldn't take the kids anywhere for a while unless I was with him, because it was too much work. It's just too much effort. And he didn't want to do it. But then suddenly he's taking the children out with him to places. He's offering to take them. He's inviting them. He is spending time with them every day. Even this past week, he's typing furiously. He wrote an insane amount of words this past week. When he told me everything he wrote, I said, how does somebody even do that? It's like Stephen King on drugs, writing Cujo in a week type volume of what he was writing. I was like, how do you even have the mental space to do this? And he's in the middle of typing furiously. And our youngest comes up and asks him in a very sweet toddler voice to wrestle with him on the floor. And I watched this happen, and it still amazes me that this is the man that I've now am married to. He said, okay. And he pushed the laptop up or back on the table, got up and went and wrestled and played with all the kids for like 20 minutes. And 5 years ago, that definitely would not have happened. 100% that would not have happened. Pat offers to help me when he sees that I'm getting frustrated. He will come to me and say, what can I do? Like he'll wrap me up in a hug and say, I know that you're having a hard time with whatever lately. What can I do to help? Let me help you. We're partners. It's very important to me that you get your alone time, or, if you need to de-stress, I'm here for you. And he says it in those kinds of words that, again, 5 years ago, never would have happened. It would have been tooth and nail. I wouldn't have even asked, because I would have known that his reaction would have been so demoralizing to me and make me feel so alone that I wouldn't have even bothered. So his giving of himself, he pours out so much more now, just to me and the kids. And it's palpable. Now, if you are married to an amazing man from the very start, like, Bob, that's what I always did. Great. That's awesome. For me to see the difference in what Christianity has done for Pat, it's incredible. So I feel more supported and loved than I ever have, or ever even thought possible with Pat or anybody. For me, I ask for help now more. I'm a very naturally a proud, independent person. My parents raised me to be a very independent, capable person. So yeah, I can do it all. I mean, not all of it, but I can do a lot of it. I had this mindset of engineering. We fit the pieces together. We figure out what's going to be the best way to get from A to B to C to D, and we get it done. I'm a list writing person. I'm a gung-ho physical labor type person. And I never liked the idea of even thinking of having to ask for help. Asking for help was a weakness. And although I did get very upset when Pat wouldn't just live up to my mental requests for help that I would never actually say out loud, which is very fair, right? So I've since been converting. I've had to humble myself repeatedly in asking for help, admitting that I am wrong on occasions. And not just doubling down because it's easier to do that. There have been times where it is physically painful to apologize, but I do it. And my, the length of time it takes to apologize has decreased dramatically. It used to be a couple of days, and now I might even do it within like 3 minutes. So there's marked improvement and on that front. I don't try to do it all. I ask for help, and even I allow, or I don't argue with somebody or with Pat or somebody who wants to help. I accept it, which I would have been begrudging or felt like that made me look bad if I had ever accepted help in the past. So Pat has become more helpful and more just kind of noticing that I need help, more considerate. He's immeasurably more considerate than he ever was without Christianity. And I have been more humble and willing to let go of my ego than I ever, and more patient and more apologetic when it is right for me to apologize, more contrite, I should say, than I ever would have imagined without Christianity. So our personalities have changed, and it has made us stronger together, and made us more more the team that you think a husband and wife should be, and which we weren't before. We'd always butt heads. Um, it's been some of the challenges have been for me to not to argue. God gave me a sharp wit. I don't think He meant for me to use it as a sharp tongue. So for me to realize that I don't have to argue in the moment, that I could present my case, to Pat later on as the head of our family, that that it's not my place to argue about a decision of his in front of our children, is big. So it makes me be patient enough to wait until we're alone, that I could um, uh, not argument, not making a fight of it, but to lay my case over something maybe, or just letting it go and realizing that I'm not the only one who has really good ideas about how we should handle certain family situations. Pat has some very good ideas as well, and he's the head of the family. Um, Also, practically, as we got into our conversion, we had to let go of a lot of sinful behaviors that we had, especially around sexual ethics as a couple, about birth control and spacing children out or not having any more children, pornography use. These are things that were probably the most obvious that needed to change within the confines of our marriage. So marriage changed, and we are more faithful and to each other, and have a greater appreciation and understanding, and we uphold fidelity as a value that we never would have in the past. I would have, and if I was ever insistent upon faithfulness, it would have been mostly because I'm jealous. I'm more a jealous creature by nature. It wouldn't have been because of just the value, the morality of fidelity. That would not have come into play. But as I became Christian and Catholic, I started to understand why all of that is important. It also took divorce off of the table in any of our arguments. It wasn't just, I couldn't just get up and leave and walk out. I couldn't leave of course there's times where you realize that an argument isn't going anywhere, and maybe it is time to separate just, for an hour or whatever, until you cool down a little bit. But that doesn't mean like we go and leave the house for days. That is not a possibility, and it's not even something that can be threatened any longer. So really, with our divorce and sexual ethics, that changed a lot of things in our married life once converting. Now that was a couple of years back, so it's not something that we deal with anymore, really. But that was something that changed in the pretty much in the immediate couple of months that we started studying the catechism and going to RCIA and realizing what marriage actually was. And that was a challenge. That was certainly a challenge. But looking back, our marriage as it stood before converting to Christianity would not be where it is now, and it might not even exist. It certainly would not have been, it wasn't a sacramental marriage. The graces that we receive are palpable now, and our marriage is stronger, and I have complete confidence in it. Whereas before, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure where we actually stood as a husband and wife, if there would be a Pat and Christine forever, and I would imagine what life would be like as a divorced mother. And I would prepare myself for that possibility, which I thought it was becoming increasingly more likely as the years were going on. So, the marriage that we have now is conversion has completely flipped our marriage around, all for the better. It is harder in some ways, but it is better in all ways, if that makes sense. I can understand and appreciate the struggles of couples who have a mixed marriage and mixed in faith, that it makes it difficult to move forward as a sacramental marriage when not both parties are living that sacramental marriage in the way that it ought to be, or the ideal would be for it to be lived out. For those people, I understand, and it is a challenge. And there are some wonderful saints who were able to withstand the suffering of a mixed marriage. And if you go to my Instagram, I have a story highlight saved called Mixed Marriages. I think it's called. I'd have to go back and look, but you can look through my highlights and you'll see one. And I talk about the different saints who give such wonderful examples for those who might be in mixed marriages or not, or who have a spouse who is not as faithful as they are or wish they would be, or maybe not the head of the household that they wish they would be. So go check those out, and I hope you find some consolation in those saints' lives, because it's remarkable. God wants to redeem your whole family, but He also will He allows for free will. So you grow in as much holiness as you can, and pray that by your example and by God's will that your spouse will also do the same. Okay. Well, I hope that answers the question that came in. I appreciate again all of your notes of support and the questions that came in from watching that EWTN interview. Thank you so much. And well, until next time, everyone.